Folks,
Go!
we
Drink
are
this stuff.
live. Welcome to the next to last live stream for the year on this channel. Yes, there's another one at 11:30 Eastern. I
There
know.
is.
I'm insane.
Oh, cat's
Did
here.
you know?
Yes, Glenn?
Did you know that I have not been on air for? I had to actually dust my mic. It had.
Okay, well, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry. Well, then it's a good thing we got you on.
I kept looking for cobwebs.
So, folks, this is the last talking crit of the year. We may have more guests pop in. I put the link out to a number of people. If my voice cracks, it's because, like others that are on that's on right now, I am in the midst of fighting off a flu. But I am.
Still?
Oh yeah. But don't worry, Rach got it after me, so now she's being hit she's being beat like a. She's not getting. It sucks. I actually look pretty good.
Give her some rum.
I don't have rum. I do have whiskey.
I do.
Oh, I do have whiskey.
It's the end of the year. We have a tradition of doing these end of the year shows. I for once, and I probably had this had happened the last 5 years. My wife and I got invited to a gaming party. We're gonna game, I guess, at the party, which is cool. And
it's not real gaming. It's not gaming like
board game. No, it's board game.
Yeah, I know.
It's going to be.
Thank God! I was afraid there were keys going into a basket.
Yeah, like a 1976 party there, Jim. No, we're going to be going. So we're going to a party, and so I can't drink because I'll be driving. Yada yada.
You're the DD.
Yeah, I'm the designated dumbass that has to drive.
I usually am.
We're going to do it, but for those of you that don't know, and probably everybody does know that Sport Gaming, one of the luminaries of our game, Tim Kask passed. Was last night or this morning? Not sure.
He passed this morning. Last night.
Anyway, we're gonna.
I knew he was getting up there, but it was still a punch to the gut for me.
We will go over some of the accomplishments. This man, look, this is going to be an Irish wake. This is not going to be a grim, fairy tales wake at all, because Tim was a life well gained, and he enjoyed life and he enjoyed gaming, and he was high on life, I guess you could say, right? He was
in many ways, yes,
very much high on life and gaming. And I have a few stories. He is in the North Texas RPG Con Hall of Fame. He was one of our first, or actually, he was our inaugural class of special guests, and he is in our Hall of Fame, an inaugural Hall of Fame class, because he was one of those people that came every year and provided people with a great gaming experience. And obviously, he also attended Gamehole Con and Gary Con and a lot of other smaller cons, Wizard Con, Total Con. Did he go to Total Con, Eric?
I believe he did go to Total Con, yes.
I mean, he just, he was popped up. He has a very interesting story. He was the first person ever hired by Gary. And the story he told me, and you can jump in if anybody's heard the story, which you probably have. He was introduced to D&D at a convention and had so many questions that Gary just finally got tired of answering his questions.
I heard
back then,
yeah.
You either sent a letter or you called the phone. There was no internet. So he kept calling Gary on the phone going, I don't understand what this rule means. Or we're trying to play your game and this is happening. And after about the 15th call, Gary just says, look, you don't want to just work for me because I'm just tired, because he was a teacher. He goes, I'm tired of having to answer your stupid questions all the time. And so he and Gary, he was a big part of early TSR, worked on all the supplements, especially he had some great stories about working on Blackmore. And I mean, great in terms of it's great to hear the stories without, he would tell the stories.
I think Tim's greatest contribution is literally that if you're on the teeter-totter of Gary versus Dave, if you're trying to decide Gygax versus Arneson, you only have to hear Tim's story about having what he went through with Blackmore, and this solves that equation for him.
Oh God!
Well,
yeah.
By the way, story backed up by Steve Marsh too, who's one of the most honest men in gaming.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Steve Marsh absolutely backs up his story. So, and he was obviously first editor of Dragon Magazine. He and Gary fleshed out the Player's Handbook. I mean, that was them going back and forth, and and rules questions. They worked out all that stuff. He left TSR, started his own gaming magazine, went for about 2 years, and then he went back to teaching. So he taught for 20 something years. Teacher.
And this is a great point. I made this point today when I made a post about Tim's passing, which is that, there are several people from TSR like Tim, like Mike Carr, Alan Hammock, where TSR was a part of their life, but it did not define who they were. And they understood that it wasn't peak too early, that this was just one step in a long path of their lives. Tim went on to have a great career in education.
Absolutely.
Tim came back to the industry with Eldridge Enterprises and then doing some other stuff. But Tim was away. Tim was completely away for the better part of 20 years, the same way Alan was, the same way Mike Carr was. And people forget that, right? There are people who were at TSR who, that period of time that they worked at TSR is literally the highlight of their life. And everything since then has been trying to sort of recapture some of this. But Tim was much more comfortable with who he was and what he did and the life that he led. And that's one of the greatest things to celebrate Tim. I said today, one of the greatest things, we were talking about this before the show, Tim had a very gruff exterior. But if you worked around him, and I was very lucky, I got to work around him at the Gen Con auction, I got to work around him with the Gary Con auction and so on. A lot of this was to sort of keep some folks at a distance. But it also went hand in hand with the fact that Tim's tolerance for bullshit was too small to be measured. And the grifters,
way down here,
the jackasses in the hobby, he had absolutely no time for, right? The people who were preying upon, donate stuff to our museum. Oh, we ended up selling it. I'm so sorry. Tim had no tolerance for this. And I can't sing enough praises for Tim. He was a stalwart. He was a decent guy. He didn't tolerate bullshit. And really and truly, he left his mark. We're all talking about him because he helped build the community that is now mourning for him. And I think that's an important thing to remember.
Yeah.
He was, so when he came back in the hobby, which is it Frank Menser and him stayed in touch over the years, and he invited Tim to a Gen Con. And I think this is before your time at Gen Con auctions, Jim. I don't remember.
Yes. Yeah.
But he eventually got him to come there, and they did the collectibles auction. And that was the first time he was back in gaming since really OD&D. And Tim still played OD&D. And Frank said it was so interesting talking to Tim because it was like frozen caveman. You pulled him out of this cave. He did not know anything that happened from 1982 to 2005. He had no clue what gaming was. I mentioned one time something about the drow and a Calavera. He didn't know what I was talking about. He's like, the drow. What are the drow? And I was like, he goes, what's a Calavera? And I was like, oh my gosh. Okay, well, yeah, it makes sense. So he was perfectly positioned for the OSR because he came in and he was playing a version of OD&D that it was uncorrupted and untouched for like almost 30 years. And so when he would come to cons, especially when he came to North Texas and a few other cons, he ran stuff like Temple of the Weaver Queen, Snake Riders, Arredondo. They were the most pure OD&D that you had seen in 20 something years. And that made him a very unique position in the hobby.
And he, he had really cut his teeth. There's a wonderful picture that Alan Hammock shared today of Tim running a game in Baltimore in 1975 at a small con. And not only is Alan there, God help him, wearing the Alabama Wargaming Club shirt. There's another guy sitting behind him that's also got one of the shirts on. It's a great photo. But Tim absolutely was on the front row of trying to get people to play D&D, trying to help people understand how to play D&D. What was D&D? A lot of, hey, make it your own game. And then to just sort of step into a time capsule and just be kept away from all of what became second edition and then third edition and so on and so forth. it was refreshing, right? And that's one of the reasons that it led to Eldritch is that Tim and Frank were two guys that could talk to all of this stuff.
And it also meant that Tim didn't owe anybody in the gaming hobby anything. Like Jim said, he's one of those guys like Alan and Carr that got out and then came back, and so he didn't owe anybody anything. He didn't care what anybody thought about him. So if you wanted a story about something that happened back then or about somebody, you'd go to Tim and he would tell you the absolute unvarnished truth, no bullshit. And sometimes it was shocking. And I remember him on a forum talking about somebody in our hobby, very frankly, and he later took that. It was so frank that he took it down because he felt like that person passed away afterwards. So not because of what Tim wrote, he just passed away because he was old.
Well, that would have been wonderful.
That would have been an impactful post.
Yes. But according to Tim, he felt like that person could no longer defend themselves. But that story still lives up here in my mind because it was very, I don't care. You know, where it's like, oh, how can you say that about one of the people in our hobby? It's like, I don't know. When it happened, it was real. Why would I care what, if the guy's upset or not? But it showed how classy he was. Once the guy passed away, he said, you know what, he can't defend himself. I'm going to pull that story off. So he pulled the story down, but he would tell you the story still if you asked him privately. But that's just kind of the person he was. And I was telling these guys beforehand, Tim's family lived in Dallas. And so when he would come to North Texas, he would spend a week with his family, with his son, I believe, and his grandchildren after the con. And a lot of times we would invite him to the North Texas warehouse when we had a warehouse at the time, and Doug would run games and Tim would come and we would have an absolute blast. I remember one time he came, he brought his grandkids. Doug is very, very good GM. Doug is very, very good GM. Not my kind of GM. He's a storytelling GM. We clashed on that many times, but he ran a game for the grandkids and Tim was the most absolutely delightful personality there. I don't know if it's because his grandkids were there and he didn't want to be rah, 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 but it just showed a different side of him, a softer side, a nicer side. We talked to him, we laughed, he was telling stories. It was just great to interact with him, not at a convention, but just as a person. I'm sure several of his good friends, I'm sure he and Jim Wampler and their many car trips. God love Jim.
Infamous, yeah.
There's a place in heaven just for making long car trips with Tim Kask, back and forth to Gary Con year after year. But he just was a great guy. Really nobody has a lot of bad things to say about him. If the worst you can say about somebody is they're a crusty, cantankerous old cuss, it
was opinionated. Yeah, and he was going to tell you his opinion.
He was unvarnished, and the fact of the matter is that if the people who want to go after Tim Hammer and Tongs, and mercifully I haven't seen any of these forkwits today. I think you have to look at the people saying the things, and that tells you everything. Because Tim, one of the first Gen Con charity auctions that I was at, we had somebody had donated a toy sword. And we sold it, and then we sold it for one of the kids in the audience. And, let's give the kid a sword. How much can we get for him? We raised, I don't know, $300, $400 for the charity, gave the kid the sword, but Tim knighted him. And sent him on his path. Now, Tim was like, I don't ever want to do that again. But when a year or so later, another kid, another sword, Tim did it again. And I think that the people that want to take pot shots at Tim never spent time around him. They didn't know who he was. When Gail and the Gygax Memorial Fund were flailing in the wilderness and there wasn't anything, Tim was the guy that was like, what is going on? Like, people gave you money. There ought to be a monument. And was absolutely one of the most vocal people about this, simply because he knew how much money everyday people had donated, and the longer it went with no communication and not a word of progress, the more incensed Tim was.
And he was involved in nonprofits himself. He knew the paperwork involved. He knew the responsibilities involved, and he expected those involved to show that type of responsibility.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know either, he had a charity. He was a fisherman. He loved fishing.
Yes.
And he would fish with what's the word I'm looking for?
Fly fishing.
Yeah, fly fishing.
Right.
So he sponsored a group that did diminished children that were diminished mental capacity. He would take them fishing, and they would do it because that was one thing that they would love to do. He donated a ton of money for that. He would auction every year. He would auction off stuff, like he auctioned off the staff of Jeru, whatever from Village of Hammond. He had the staff. He would auction off his hat. He'd auction off things, and the money would go toward this charity, this fishing charity. And the funny part was, for anybody that knows, Mark Greenberg, for some reason, got in his head he wanted to be the biggest collector of Timcast clothing,
personal accoutrements.
So anytime he had a staff, a hat, I don't know, boots, cap, shirt, whatever, Mark would bid it, and God help him, he'd win, because who really wants a Timcast hat that much to outbid Mark Greenberg? You don't. And so, wherever this giant closet of Timcast clothing is right now, Mark is looking over it somewhere.
So I actually talked to Mark today. I among the usual suspects of collectors, a lot of the high-end collectors had been around Tim since Tim came back. A lot of them had been at Gen Cons where Tim was still going to Gen Con back until he left the hobby. There's a lot of really quiet grieving going on today. A lot of these people were responsible for Eldridge Enterprises. I know that one of the collectors is going to be the executor of Tim's estate, and the person who's got that task, I know is mourning today. Tim was a product of the era. He's a Vietnam veteran, but as Mike will tell you, and we all have stories, Tim liked to relax, and Tim's number one choice of relaxing was to go outside and have a smoke. It was what he was smoking that sort of caught
he was smoking what nature provided.
That's right. And there are people who frequently went outside and would partake with Tim, and the stories were epic. They were legendarily funny.
And I have one. Would anybody love to hear a story?
I think we should hear your story, Mike.
Let's hear your story, Mike.
So one of the first Nortex is, or it might be either the first or second. So we had the first year, our 5 special guests were Tim, Frank, and Rob Kuntz, and then we also had Janelle Jaquays and Dennis Sestier.
Wow.
And so, Doug didn't know these people, and I had just mentioned I met them all at Gen Con because I'd gone to Gen Con the 2 previous years, 2007, 2008. I'd met them, and I thought they would be amenable to come to North Texas. So Doug cold calls them, as Doug would often do. And they all said, sure. And Frank had the famous line, if you give a game designer a room and something to eat, he'll be there, which is pretty much true. And so he said, yeah, come, we'll pay for everything. So they came. And so he got to know Tim. Tim's was rascal guy. He came, he ran Temple of the Weaver Queen, got the first ever TPK at North Texas, TPK to party. Afterward, he said, those are the worst effing saving throws I've ever seen a party do. And they all died in the last room. So he's coming back for next year, and he calls Doug up and he goes, Doug, I just wanted you to know I run games a lot better when I've got some ganja. Can you get me some ganja for the convention? So Doug's like, sure, whatever. So Doug calls me up. He goes, Mike, what's ganja? Tim wants some. I said, hold on. You lived you're my age. You were in the Marines 2 years. You were a police, or 4 years. You're in the police officer for 2 years. How can you not know what ganja is? You were a cop. I don't know. What is it? What do you think it is? Oh, I think it's dope. Yes, it's dope. Tim wants to get stoned so he can run a game. He's like, well, I don't know anybody that sells that stuff. I said, why are you calling me? I don't know anybody that sells that stuff. I said, but I know somebody that might.
Know somebody.
And That's so right. I will not drop this man's name, but I will tell you, if you talk to me privately, he came to our early conventions. If you ever walk past somebody who says that guy that guy right there smokes dope. This is the guy you would point to in a crowd and say, that guy smokes dope. Long hair, glasses, eyes slit, but the nicest guy you've ever met in your life.
I think you mean he was the most relaxed guy.
Very relaxed, maybe with an odor about him, perhaps. It maybe
he might have been mellow.
Very yes, and maybe
Very
if you walk by him,
green.
you might have said, "Whoa, what's that smell?" Oh, it's that guy. So I call the guy up. I said, "Here's our problem," and I didn't want to, accuse him. Like, look, I think you're a dopehead because you look like a dopehead, but I'm just gonna throw this out there. He's like, "I can help you out." And so I got you covered. I got you covered. So things were worked out. And Tim ran some great games, and everything went okay. So as Tim's leaving, he goes to Doug and hands Doug a bag and says, "Here, you can have the rest of this. I didn't finish it off." And Doug's like, "What the hell am I doing with the bag?"
We should have saved that as Tim's memorial weed.
And so Doug's like, "This is illegal." He's like, "Well, I gotta go. See you later." He jumps on the bus and heads out to the airport. And Doug's like, so Doug just shoves it in the trash can there out by the hotel.
Well, and do you guys remember when Farmville was a big deal?
Yes.
There was an equivalent of Farmville called like Pot Farmer or something.
Yeah,
Tim was avidly playing this on his phone. So his Facebook feed was this constant series of updates of, like, I reaped a bushel of new buds and so on. And it was just, like
I remember being on the phone with Tim talking about the Gygax Memorial Fund, and in the middle of the conversation, he'd be like, "Hold on a second. I gotta harvest my pot.
Yes.
Well, if I don't harvest my pot, it goes to waste."
That's right. And he is feverishly hitting his phone like a 13-year-old girl's texting a friend. He's just bing, 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 bing. It was just great.
I don't have a quite as exciting Tim Cass story, but I met him at WizardCon, which apparently is his last con.
Yeah.
And I know people are saying, what he does and lists his accomplishment, but he really appreciated the fact that I remembered his efforts on the Adventure Gaming magazine. For you don't know, after he left TSR, apparently he spun up a magazine on his own dime and tried to make a go of it. And I thought it was a pretty good magazine, and I bought every issue. My store stopped carrying it after number 3.
I remember seeing it, but I never bought a copy. I didn't.
So the best.
Yeah, I have a whole set.
I did hear Tim one time offhandedly say, "If as many people had complimented me on Adventure Gaming magazine and bought it, we'd still be in business."
The quality was very good. The quality was excellent of that magazine.
It was fabulous.
Yeah.
It really was.
It was basically Dragon magazine quality, which may have been to its detriment because that probably cost a lot of money to make that nice a magazine.
Yeah.
And I think he told me before he had a lot of problems getting hobby stores to sell it because it was like the early Dragon magazines that covered everything. It wasn't D&D centric or whatever. It just would cover anything. There would be war games articles, gaming articles, board game, whatever. And I just think the industry was moving away from that. It was moving more towards, because as Dragon moved closer and closer to only what TSR published, a lot of other house magazines moved towards that model.
Like a White Dwarf, same thing.
Well, there were only 4 magazines at the time, right? There was Dragon, there was the Space Gamer, there was White Dwarf, and there was Adventure. There was the Tim's magazine, and the thing was that Dragon was still mostly TSR centric. And where White Dwarf was sort of D&D centric, then it became a little more Warhammer centric after Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay got. Space Gamer was Steve Jackson Games, but it was a little bit of a mishmash, and it didn't seem to sell as well. Adventure Gaming tried to sort of be the thread that sort of connected all of this, but it just didn't. I bought mine. I bought my copies at a game store when I would go, and then. But it was also, and this is the curse of those early magazines, it was pretty thin. And that was just it was going to be expensive to publish. I don't know, Mike, you can correct me, but I think it's like 32 pages or 48 pages.
I should have brought my collection.
Yeah,
in
and
the garage. I don't want to go get it, but yeah, it lasted for, I want to say,
Eight-
bi-monthly for 2 years. I think it was
Yeah,
12
8 issues.
and it was, but it was very good quality. I had the same problem that Rob had, is that my store I stopped being able to find it anywhere.
Yeah.
I wasn't able
Yeah.
to complete my collection until the internet came around. I was able to find the issues I missed because it just kind of, I think Tim had a lot of, like I said, he mentioned before, he just had problems having stores carry it, because he was a small one guy. He's calling up people on his phone and say, hey, would you carry my magazine? Back then you didn't have the internet, so he couldn't call up a publisher or anybody to say, could you get this in X amount of stores? This was
Right.
all Tim trying to do this himself. It was just, and I'm sure a lot of it was a labor of love, and Tim probably got frustrated at a certain point and then just, well, he's a teacher and he just went back to teaching, and just gaming was something he did, as Jim said. And that was something that he probably didn't think about a whole lot for 20 years, and then all of a sudden, hey, come on back. And we're all still here. And we want to hear stories about the old days. And he was only too ready to provide those stories. But he was, I loved Tim because he'd come to North Texas, and he was exactly as advertised. If you wanted to run, I remember we had a guy one time came and he went to one of Tim's games. And afterwards I said, well, how'd you like Tim's guys? Well, I didn't like it at all. I was like, what's up with it? Well, this, and this, and this. And I was like, okay, you're playing OD&D with Tim. You say, well, I thought I would get a good game. No. You were there. You got a game of OD&D. Nobody said anything. It was going to be good, easy, something you understood. You got a game exactly as it was run in probably 1977. That's how Tim would run a game. You got a little piece of history there. Because, he didn't always look at the rules, and he did this, and he would make up stuff on the fly. And I'm like, and he did, whatever. I said, he ran a game exactly like people. Look, I played in those days. That's how OD&D people ran their games in 1978, 79.
God help you if you want to challenge him at the table.
Oh boy.
I have
a good story about that too.
Matt's Thursday game. A lot of the guys from my Thursday game here with Matt Evans, Brad came the first year, and he got in a game with Tim. And he challenged him at the table.
Oh dear!
Because Brad is one of those nitpicky people who look at it shouldn't have been that way. It shouldn't. You don't tell that to Tim. You don't, because
he was there at the time. He saw the ancient magic as it was created. Don't tell him
how it runs. You don't tell him how the game runs.
My favorite Tim Kask story, not even his story, is just the idiots that wanted to argue the pronunciation of the boule and decided to make that a thing on the internet. Now, if you didn't know this, Tim has a series of shows on the YouTube, The Curmudgeon in the Basement.
Yeah.
These are all like must listen, must watch. Tim would just go down in his basement, throw the switch, and it was on and off rant, but it was just great. But my God, the one where he finally just has had enough, again, of the forkwits on the internet and decides to just pull up the gigantic man of war and let loose with an entire broadside over how you pronounce boule, and explains how the boule came about and all the rest. And then people still wanted to argue. And at that point, you're just done. No time.
I want to tell a story. This is from my good friend, Zach Glazer. And Zach, if I mess the story up a little bit, forgive me. But I have him tell me this story every once in a while because it's such a great story. So he and Jim Whopper were playing a game of Tim's at Gary Con. This is probably, I don't know, Gary Con 3 or 4, one of the early Gary Cons. And they're at a big table. There's probably about 15 people. And he's running the game as Tim, whatever. And so halfway through the game, Tim was big on smoke breaks. Tim had to have a smoke break constantly. So he's doing a smoke break. Okay, we got a smoke break. 15-minute smoke break. Everybody come back. So Jim and Zach are sitting there. And they're doing something with their paper. And this guy who was at the end of the table walks up to Tim and goes, I'd like to talk to you about your DMing. And so Zach and Jim Whopper, the quiet before the storm. And he goes, I have to say, you don't know a damn about running a D&D game. You don't know the rules. And he just proceeded to lambaste Tim about what he didn't know about D&D. And Zach says, Jim and I went, pushed away from the table.
Right, back away.
Because
This is going to be like one of
about to
those.
be an explosion.
This is going to be like a nuclear test in Nevada.
And there was an explosion. And Tim basically told this guy to go F himself. They go, why don't you go fuck yourself? I was running. And he kicked him out of the game right there. Said, you're done. Yeah. And I said, do you know who this guy was? And Zach says, I never saw him in another convention ever in my life.
You know what?
Tim, I never saw him again. Tim just lambasted for like 5 minutes and said, get the hell out of my table. You don't know what you're talking about.
I think what you're saying is Tim was somebody who frequently did a lot of good service for the community. This
guy was telling Tim, you have not a clue how to run a OD&D game. You don't have an absolute clue. And they're like, oh dear.
Oh my God. There are people in our chats wanting to argue with the deceased spirit of Tim Kask. Folks, I hope he haunts you. I hope he haunts you. I hope
for those who don't know, Tim created the boule. He created it.
My God.
Figure out how it was pronounced. Yes. It's how it's pronounced. However Tim says it was pronounced because he created it.
So, hey, by the way, Eric, thank you for that link. Now I got all the PDF for Adventure in Gaming, so now I can read what I missed.
Nice.
And let's be clear, the link to Mud Puppy Games goes to Jim Wampler's business website, and all that money is going to go to Tim. So if you don't have Adventure Gaming, if you want to get a great slice of the hobby from the day back in the day, you could do a lot worse than buying the Adventure Gaming issues from Mud Puppy. And Jim Wampler will absolutely give the check for Tim's proceeds to his widow.
By the way, if you have a problem with Boule versus Bullet, whatever, do like we do and call them land sharks. We just call them land sharks in my game, and we're just
sure.
There you go, land shark. Boom, you're done. You don't have to have any big dumb fights about how to pronounce the name.
I think Zach nails it. Tim would be the most amazing ghost. It would be like the ghost of Christmas Future meets the ghost of worst Christmas ever.
And by the way, Zach, did I tell that story correctly? I tried to get the gist of it, but Zach tells it better. If you ever, Zach, have him tell you the Tim Kask game story. He probably remembers what adventure it was and everything. But it was such a hilarious story because the best part to me is he never saw that guy at a convention again. Like that guy was after that he was a one and done. He's like, I'm out.
Well, he's probably like, Tim Kask special guest. Nope, not going to that one.
Tim Kask is at this convention. You're Gary Con every year. Well, I guess Gary Con's on my rearview mirror.
Yes.
I'm not going to hit down that. Oh, I'd like to go to this convention in Dallas called North Texas. Oh, shoot. Tim's a guest there, too. Well, I guess I won't be going to North Texas either.
And Tim, Tim's nature was really one of he was very congenial to a point, but he was also sort of private. And he was one to, wing it is a good term, made it up, sure, but he winged it. Tim was just like my favorite story. And it's funny because I heard this story on Monday night and we didn't know obviously what was going to happen. But Tim, when he got back at the Gen Con auction, there was all this stuff that had come out that Tim had no idea what it was, right? It was post Tim's time in the industry. And so somebody was talking about how they had put some fairly valuable items in the auction. And Tim, as an auctioneer, some of it he knew, some of it he didn't. And somebody told the story on Monday night of Tim gets this thing. He's like, oh, what the hell is this? Oh, all right, $5. And, it went for 15 and it was like something that should have probably started at 50 or 75. And the person who was telling the story on Monday night is just, yeah. And again, this is sort of Tim's charm, right? He wasn't a rabid badger, but if you poked him enough, you were going to get clawed. Mm-hmm. And I watched it. I watched it at the auction. He was unbelievably generous. He was a decent guy. But I watched the people poke at him and he just, I got no time for this. He just take that flat cap and bring it down a little lower. And
he was the human equivalent of Honey Badger don't give a shit.
That's right.
There you go. And listen, I at Gamehole, this is going back before COVID. For folks that don't know, A number of years ago, Tim had cancer. He went through chemo.
Uh,
I have gone through chemo. Chemo can give you chemo brain. You get confused. Been there. I probably still am confused. But I'm at Game Hall and I'm walking through the vendor hall, trying to get back to the Frog God table. I was probably trying to relieve Mike, and Tim sees me, and I'm like, "Oh, hi, Tim." And he gets right in my face, starts wagging the finger, and tells me, "Who do you think that I work for 5 cents a word? I don't work for 5. I haven't worked for 5 cents a word." And I'm like, "What the hell?" And it goes on, and he's going on, and Wampler comes up behind him and just goes, "He thinks you're Bill Webb."
And that tells you everything, right? That tells you both sides of the story. Number one, that Bill Webb is going to offer Tim Kask a 5 cent a word job as a cheap shit deal, and Tim is like, "Oh hell, I'm doing this."
I'm
You and
thinking,
Bill look nothing alike.
I was about to say I wasn't wearing I wasn't wearing Crocs, and I wasn't wearing my pajamas, so I was like, I don't look like Bill Webb, but in any case,
Eric,
One thing he said, like, "Oh, he thought you were Brad Pitt."
no.
Bill
God.
Webb.
Eric, you are blessed with that.
Uh,
You know how, like, I think of him like in the entertainment industry when Don Rickles was alive. If he insulted you, you felt honored.
Yes.
That's the way I felt with Tim Kask at a convention.
All right, but he didn't insult me.
If he's
He
grouchy,
insulted Bill, thinking
look.
I was Bill.
No, he was insulted by Bill. And
Yes.
he was giving Bill both barrels back.
Yes.
That's
Right.
the best part. You just
But I
happen to
would've
independently
said,
not be Bill.
hey,
I was just standing.
Just for context, how did Bill insult him? I might have
Apparently,
missed
Bill lowballed him on a price
Bill
for
Webb. That's a word. Which
Oh,
I
this is
believe.
my shock
Honestly,
face.
I think that was our
No, I'm
standard
shocked.
rated broadcast.
I probably.
I think. It was
I just remember going, "Wow!" And then when Jim explained he was going through chemo or just gone through chemo, I went,
chemo brain.
"I understand completely now." All right, no, I'm not. And by the way, I first met Tim because of Glenn and Vince Florio, my first North Texas. They were nice enough to introduce me to Tim, and they explained who I was, and Tim had no clue, which was fine. But then we got into a conversation about teachers, school teachers, and how he felt they should be armed. And I was like, I don't know where this came from, but I agree wholeheartedly because I've been in schools. And yes, they probably should be armed. But he probably taught in some tough schools and tough neighborhoods. So yes.
He was. I think it was interesting. People. Also, I tell you another bullet point. For those of you who've been to North Texas, we run a game of Circus Maximus. It has a long and storied history now. We give out trophies. It's an incredible time. Jim's played in it recently. He sees what people talk when they talk about the game. It's something else to behold. My brother is a lunatic, but he learned from the feet of Tim. Tim ran the first 2 or 3 Circus Maximus, and Robert's watching all this time going, I would do this differently. And thinking in his head,
right.
Not saying it out loud to Tim, my God, no. But thinking I would do this differently. So after about 3 years, he approaches Doug and said, I don't think Tim's doing the best job because I would do this, this, this. And so we asked him, would you like to step down? He goes, oh, I hate doing it anyway. Yeah, sure, whatever. And Robert took over. And so, then Robert and Doug took their time and worked out. I mean, the game is great. So it's become the game it was, but it started out with Tim running it. And I'm glad that he suggested we run it because it worked out great. And now it's one of the highlights of North Texas is the Circus Maximus game started by Tim. But one of the things that Robert objected to, and Robert was a smoker for 30 years, recently quit because he had a heart attack a few years ago, quit smoking. But he said, man, I've never seen a guy that takes so many smoke breaks. During one Circus Maximus game, the guy takes like 50. I said, you realize some of those aren't just smoke breaks, right? He goes, "Oh, I know," because he smells when he comes back in. He said, but he's still taking too many of the smoke breaks. It doesn't matter what he's smoking, there's too many of them. And I said, yeah, you're probably right, because the Circus Maximus game shouldn't go like 5 hours or whatever it was going when Tim was running, because he was taking a lot of smoke breaks. But no, Robert does a great job. But Robert learned it. He learned from Tim. Tim would do it. And he'd go, I like when Tim does this, but I don't like this. And so he just watched him, took notes, and then he took over, and he and Doug worked out the system we have now. And it's a great game. I think it could go a little faster possibly still, but people that play it love it, and it's a great experience to do it. But Tim was the first guy that did that. Tim, I mean, I'll tell you something else. Eldritch Enterprises, the company he formed with Chris Clark, Jim Ward, and Frank Menser, they all published stuff there. And I'm going to tell you this without being mean or cruel. Tim's stuff was the best because he was publishing pure OD&D modules that were not untainted by any other type of gaming. And so he published through Eldritch Enterprises. He published a version of Temple of the Weaver Queen. He published, which I think is a really good module, Snake Riders of Arredondo.
I got that.
There's a third one that Tim published. I can't remember now, but Tim's stuff was really good. I really enjoyed Tim's published works. I thought he did a really good job. And like I said, if you want absolutely what an OD&D module would look like if you just pulled it straight from 1977, look up Tim's work, especially Temple of the Weaver Queen, Snake Riders, and you will see exactly what an OD&D module would look like if it was written in the modern day without any influence at all. He was a great influence on our hobby. He was one of those guys that was kind of like right next to history. As history is happening, he's there watching all this happen, and he's part of all this, which is a unique position at the time. Because as I said, if you ask him to tell you stories, he was a great guy to tell stories. He would sign anything you gave to him. He would tell stories. I remember when he signed my Dragon Magazine #1 back at one of the Gen Cons I went to, he added a little note there, and he said, this is, if you ever played a game of D&D, you show this to the DM and tell him this is for an automatic crit. And it said like auto crit per Tim Kask or something. I mean, he just would do fun stuff like that. Now, unfortunately, I was the DM for our group, so I never got to use the auto crit on my Dragon Magazine #1. But he would just do stuff like that. But yeah, he signed everything. He would tell you stories. He was a great guy. Look, we spent a lot of late evenings at Denny's at North Texas. You know, who wants to go eat at 11 p.m.? Tim's going to go. Let's go.
Did you ever DM for him?
For Tim?
Yeah.
No, I did not. I did not DM for Tim. I don't think Tim. I saw him play in one game once at North Texas. I don't think that was really his gig or his bag. I did not see him play in a lot of other games. Now he did. Now Doug DM'd him when he came to the warehouse.
Really?
He loved Doug's games, which, you know, like I said, I have a philosophical difference because Doug was a story gamer, but Tim would go with it. He loved Doug's game. But that's the only time I ever saw Tim play was in Doug's games.
I just, for some reason, I thought for one time he may have, played in your B1.
No, that was Errol Otis. I DM'd Errol Otis twice. Okay. That's one of the bullet points of my life, by the way. So just it all goes downhill from there. DM for Errol Otis, and it's like next one is like the next one is we'll work the table with Eric and Zach at Gary Con, and it goes all the way down there. And so that was it. But Errol was a great guy too. But.
So one of the things I think we absolutely have to say is Tim's passing just gives us another reason to say what we normally say on the show, which is if you can get to a show where some of the old guard are still going to be, you really need to take the time to do that. Tim's passing is the closing of a window that we will never be able to open again. Nobody's ever going to be able to just call Tim or walk up to him at a show and ask him a question. And while Tim was very willing to sit down and be interviewed and said a lot of things on his own show, I was talking to somebody today and I said, I'm afraid to even look in my autograph book because I'm pretty sure I have Tim's autograph. But if I look at it and I don't, I'm just going to be sick. I'm just absolutely going to be sick to my heart. And so the people like Mike Carr, my God, Mike Carr is still crawling around on top of tables at Gary Con, at Gen Con, the way he was 50 years ago.
Mhm.
Wow.
And and Alan Hammock and Steve Winter and Errol Otis and all of these people continue to put in some time to give you an opportunity to interact with them and speak with them and and really the onus on seeing them is on you. And if you don't take the time and the effort to spend some time with these people, to talk to these people, to tell them how much their work means to you, Harold Johnson is at Gen Con every year, and he works at the auction every year. And if you're sitting in the audience and you don't walk over at least once and say, "Hey, Harold, like I can't tell you how much I loved it," he'll never know, and you will always regret it because when the day comes that you can't talk to Harold or Alan or Mike Carr or any of the rest of these folks, Merrill Rasmussen.
Oh God.
I mean,
Merrill's great.
I am famously for saying that the top secret rules are awful, but Merrill's been showing up at conventions for almost 50
He's
years,
the gentleman, yes.
running games in his tuxedo, dragging his
Uh.
poor suffering wife with him to all these shows. And
She likes. He's told me before, confidentially, she likes traveling with him. So
well, and you know what? I'm glad because really and truly, these are the people that want to meet you and hear what their games meant to you. And yes, Tim had a time limit. There was only so much time he was willing to give you, but he would give you that time to say some nice things.
from what Jim's saying, in 20 years, old school cons are not going to feature old school guys anymore. They won't
No.
be. And it's going to be old school. You know who's going to be old school?
It's going to be Jonathan Tweet. It's
Yeah.
going to be,
I was going to say me and Eric and Jim will be old school. And
Yeah, we'll be on our little rascals.
and Rob. Everybody here will be old school.
We're
Hold
gonna be
on,
having
I'm
little-
on a podcast, and for some reason we call ourselves the RPG Agent, and I'm still thinking that I am like this junior high kid reading Tim Katz, reading Gary Guy, reading, and I'm ancient now. Fucking hell, where did the time go?
You are, Rob. I mean, we are. We all in 20 years, all five of us will be really ancient, and we'll be, and the guys that started the hobby will all be gone, and we'll be around to I'll still be able to tell the story, about Tim wanting ganja at the convention. But that's all there'll be is stories. You won't be able to hear anything from the mouth of the people who these actually.
No, you'll be hearing it from the mouth of the people who heard it from the mouth of the people. But by the way, I'm going to make a slight interlude here. Agile just dropped $100.
Wow.
Agile Monks, and he also gifted 5 memberships prior. So I'm going to read his super chat. I'm extremely blessed that my last experience with Tim was about a month ago when he, out of nowhere, called me out on his show as a strong and positive supporter of the hobby. And it was people like me that said, kept him. Now you're leaving me in suspense, dude.
It just says for Tim, for kept him going for Tim.
I see it now.
That's
for Tim,
incredible.
I love the man.
That is wow.
It was so long it wouldn't put on the screen.
That is great, and that's just amazing too. That you got that call out from Tim. That's a great shout out, man. That is
because Tim knew the people that he liked.
Fugly, I'm going to punch you next time I see you, which is going to be in a month. Zach Smith will be old school. Stop.
Oh, God, no.
Just stop. Time out.
I think we have to time him out for a day or so.
That's like saying that.
We've been talking about Tim for about an hour. We could talk about him for another 4 hours, frankly.
Oh yeah.
And like all of us, Tim had some foibles, but my God, how do you not celebrate a guy that pestered Gary to the point that Gary just was like, it's easier if I hire you than I have to put up with you. And Tim endured, obsessive hobbyists before any of us had any idea what it was like. Tim oversaw Dragon grow from, I mean, you really got to want the early issues of Dragon because they are paper thin. And look at what it grew into. My subscription started with issue 45, but I had a handful of issues before that. But by the time 45 had rolled along, Dragon was an amazing monthly publication. It was a core part of the hobby. When he walked away and went into the next stage of his life, he was happy. He had a family, and I said today in my post about it, Tim's passing was the ideal. You can think about how you might want to go. Now, I've always joked that I'm just going to disappear into the sea at the Electric Daisy Carnival. Once I get diagnosed terminal, I'm going to tape $100 bills to myself and just disappear into the crowd with a handful of recreational pharmaceuticals. But Tim was at home with his family and his friends, and he went peacefully.
Absolutely.
And I've talked about this on the show. I lost my dad a few years ago, and it wasn't peacefully. It was as bad as it could be. And truthfully, when I was talking with Mark Greenberg today, and I said, Tim had about as good a death as you could ever hope to have. He was surrounded. He was loved. In our community, he is beloved. And if anybody wants to throw a rock towards Tim Kask's reputation, I am more than willing to have that discussion with you with a couple of crowbars, because he was a solid guy. He was an honest guy. He was unflinchingly honest. And we need more of that in the hobby. We need more of that, frankly, everywhere, right? If you can't step back and say, well, there's a problem there,
Right.
then we've got bigger problems.
Well, the thing about Tim is he could say what he wanted because you couldn't hurt Tim. Well, what are you going to do to Tim? Cancel Tim? You can't cancel Tim. I mean, that's what's great, because we need more people like that are willing to, just give their opinion on stuff, that aren't worried about being canceled and being right. Well, I've got something to lose because I'm still in the industry. He was never really in the industry, and he didn't have to care about what anybody thought. And I thought that was the greatest defense he ever had, was that, look, I'm just here to share stories and talk about stuff. You can't cancel me. And right. Some people tried. Every once in a while, somebody would try to cancel him. And, very famously a few years ago, he had some internet wars with people, and they were like, we're going to get you. Oh, we're going to get you canceled. And it was like, what? What are you going to do? What would they stop him from doing? Nothing.
Nothing. Not a damn thing.
That's right.
Not a damn thing. And
stop him.
Everybody should be so lucky as to have the kind of legacy that Tim leaves. And it's not just, I said today, he helped create the very community that is now mourning his loss. And that's pretty spectacular.
Let's do a toast to Tim.
Toast to Tim.
Toast to Tim.
Pour one out for Tim tonight. Think of him. Think of his family. And I think this goes without saying, but Jim Wampler was Tim's ride or die for the last 10 plus years, and nobody understood or got along as well with Tim as Jim did. He was his driver to get into conventions when Tim didn't want to drive, couldn't drive. When Tim was horribly ill, Jim was there for him. Every family should count itself lucky that they have a friend of the family that helps take care of them as they get older. My grandparents, they had a guy named Eldon, and Eldon is the guy who found my grandmother on the floor of the kitchen when she fell and broke her hip. And Jim Wampler is that kind of guy for Tim. And I think that we could all do a lot worse than emulate that behavior too, because where Tim couldn't come to GaryCon anymore, Jim was the guy that helped him. When Tim needed a scooter to get around at conventions, Jim's the guy that helped arrange that. Mm-hmm. And if you had any interaction with Tim in the last few years at a convention, the reason you got that opportunity is because Jim Wampler stepped up and helped make it happen. Yep. And so of all of us that are grieving Tim's loss tonight, like Mark and Jeff and Bill and all the rest who knew him, Jim Wampler has lost a little bit of his soul because, frankly, they were almost brothers. They could have been brothers from both the irascible kind of demeanor to the just genuine decency. And so, if we're going to raise one for Tim, let's also raise one and keep Jim Wampler in our thoughts tonight as well.
Amen.
Amen.
Hey guys, I got to take off. I got things to do tonight. Thanks for letting me hang out for an hour and talk about Tim. God bless all you guys. Hope we have a great 2026.
Same here.
Talking Crit will be back next week, and we'll have God knows what we're going to do next week. I have no clue. It's a brand new year though, so you know.
Well, so we'll have to. We didn't really talk about this year closing out. I think next year we'll talk about 2025 and what we hope to see in 2026. I think it'll be an exciting. It'll be a good, exciting time.
Later, guys. Everybody have a great, safe evening. I love everybody here that I'm seeing right now.
Happy New Year, Mike.
Eric, maybe not as much as the other three, but you know.
Oh well, I
love you too, Eric. Love you guys.
I
love
resemble
you,
that
love
remark.
you,
Damn you!
Yeah.
I love all you guys. You guys be safe.
I could boot you before you even leave, so you better watch it, man.
Have a happy.
Well, all right.
Look at that, he ducked out.
Ah,
So
okay.
let's see. Here we are, the Lonely Heart Bachelors on New Year's Eve. This couldn't get sadder if we tried.
Well, it will because, like I said, I got another live stream to go on at 11:30 tonight. It was supposed to be myself and Rach. Rach might not make it because.
Yeah, because you got her sick.
All right. Somebody got my parents sick, and then my parents got me sick, and then I tried to isolate myself from Rach. But I needed to get back to the bed, so I had to get her sick.
Snoopy thinks you're full of hoo-ha.
I could only sleep in my recliner for so many nights. It was getting to that point. So, she had to get sick. Yeah. You dropped before you got booted. I wouldn't boot you, Mike.
I don't know. It would have been worth it if you had.
Yeah, might have.
Well, no, he didn't say booted. He said he dropped before I got botted.
Botted?
Is somebody turning him into an AI now?
Oh, there we go.
We could only hope. I look forward to AI Satan. That's going to be
well.
good.
If you turn him into an AI, you'll never get another word in.
Well, if you turn him into an AI, then we wouldn't have to worry about the potato cam, right? Because the
AI. What we need to do is we need to buy him a new camera. That's what Santa needs to bring Mike is a new HD camera. That's for sure.
Oh, jeez.
That's okay to me.
I don't know. Anyway, so let's see. What are we all doing tonight? Well, obviously we've got the live stream later. We're not going to go too much longer just because Eric's got to get on. And
Eric's old man here's got to probably take a nap or something like that in between the two.
I probably will too. So because I've been drinking,
but if we're going to have a short show, this is a good place to probably sort of wind it down tonight.
Yeah, we're right about an hour.
Yeah.
Jim, as always, thank you. It's been here, folks. It's been a great year. It's been a great December. I gotta say, all things considered, there's been bumps in the year, but as far as this channel, this community, you've all been great. Agile has been not just awesome to me, but to many others in this community that I know of. Just really thank you. But I want to thank everybody because the channel has grown, and that's because of your support. And that's the reason why, suffering through the flu, we're going to be coming back again in 2.5 hours.
Can't get away from us.
Yeah, right. And now, folks, by the way, if you go to this channel, we're on the homepage, and you go to the posts, there's a link. You can get the Restream link and join us on screen at 11:30. Okay, because
my God, it's going to be filled with stars.
It's at the 11:30 show is literally the community show, so we're looking forward to seeing faces and voices and putting people together.
So
yeah,
it's going to be shenanigans.
Yes, right.
Absolute shenanigans. And let me just echo what Mike and Eric and I talk about this. One of the most striking things about Talking Crit over the last year, like all of Eric's shows and Eric's channel in particular, is just we've watched this just amazing growth. That frankly, the best part of it is we didn't buy it, right? We didn't go out and buy a bunch of followers, because the sad accounts out there that buy followers, then when you look at their engagement rate, where like they have a video that gets 10 views and no reactions. We have, how many people have we had in the chat tonight, Eric?
We hit like 48 live logged in.
Right. So we have roughly 50 people who are in our chat and
At one
and
time, we
listening to us
probably
and
total was
carrying on
probably
and so on and so
75.
forth.
Yeah.
But it's been that way steadily all year, right? We've got a tremendously active chat. We have a lot of views. We have a lot of views live, but we also have a pickup over the course of the week, and that's all because of whoever's watching this. The engagement, which is not what we're trying to farm, right? I
Right.
mean, I hate to tell you this. This show would probably be the same way every week, no matter what. We just decided to put it on the air instead of just having a group phone call. And we talk about the stuff that matters to us. It's nice that it resonates with other people, and we say the things we think, because we're not saying them because we think you want to hear them. We're saying them because it's the way we feel.
Right.
And I'm very grateful for Eric and Mike for letting me come on the show. I think I can't remember my first show. We'll have to look this up at some point, but it's been over a year and a half, I think.
Oh, easily.
Yeah.
John.
And really and truly, from all of us, 2025 has been amazing, and we really look forward to 2026.
I just want
gonna
to
be
thank
great.
everybody for their support on my Kickstarter. It's pretty nice to have
Yeah.
a five figures Kickstarter. And I've been hard at work at Christmas vacation, finishing it up. The index is a little bit of a monster, but I'm over to Crest. And hopefully January we'll see everybody get their rewards. And again, thank you for your support.
And I
And
thank all
for
of
having
you.
Glenn has his book. Glenn
Yes,
is now a
quick
public
plug.
author on the federal
I'm
exchange.
thankful for this.
It's on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble.
Leave a review, please.
It's a good book, and if you buy a copy, he'll sign it at North Texas and WizardCon.
Yeah, I will. And thank you, folks, for putting up with me for another year.
So, and folks, you'll get Glenn again on Friday.
I would. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, first Friday.
Oh wow.
All right, folks. So listen, everybody. I don't know. Watch. I don't know. Stranger Things. I still haven't caught the new season yet. I know. But go. But we're 11:30, 2.5 hours, or 11:30 Eastern.
Well, 10:30 here.
10:30 for those centralized people. I'll be back. Hopefully you'll be back. If you want to join us, go to this channel's homepage, go to the posts. There's a link there, and hopefully we'll see you then. I'll see many of you in about